Welcome, everybody, to the Highly Conscious Man podcast. I have with me today a very special guest. I am excited for this conversation. I have with me Elliott Hulse, and he is an amazing human being. I recommend, just listening to this interview and searching Elliott Hulse's name on Google and watch his YouTube videos. You'll learn a lot. But thanks so much for being with me, Elliott.
My pleasure.
There are so many things I would love to talk with you about today, but first, I think the first thing would like to discuss with you is the different archetypes of men, which is the king, warrior, magician, lover. In the world today, what do you think is lacking most in men that you see around the world in these archetypes?
Well, just to bring some context to it, what you're talking about is a quadrated psyche that was proposed by Carl Jung, where, he spoke about feeling, thinking, feeling, doing, and being. Thinking, feeling, doing, being, so we got personality types out of that. And then it was evolved into these mythical characters by Robert Moore, who worked with a lot of men. So he used he turned them into the king, warrior, magician, lover. So the quadrated psyche and the mythological explanation describes our ability to act, warrior, our ability to think, magician, our ability to feel, which is lover, and our ability to be, which is the king. And I don't think that our real issue is an imbalance between the four, but really what our problem is a unresourceful relationship to each one of or any one of those. So, for example, right now I'm reading Robert Moore's Facing the Dragon, and in it he's talking about evil and this concept of evil that we've experienced throughout, mythology and religion. We've decided not to acknowledge evil in the postmodern world, but the way he described evil's manifestation in the psyche is how we have shadow forms of our king, warrior, magician, lover. So an improper or an unresourceful relationship to your king energy that allows evil in will look like a tyrant. So rather than a generative king, that aspect of you that is meant to be and to lead ends up being a tyrant on the outside. Either that or the polar opposite, which would be a weakling, someone who doesn't speak up for what they believe in and doesn't stand their ground and doesn't support the world around him to evolve. So we see that also too with men. In particular, this is kind of where I've struggled in certain parts of my life with the warrior, being overly dominant. We're almost a sadist and a masochist, where, I got to playing football and strength training and strongman to the point where I tore both of my biceps. And it's such a brute and such a powerful, aggressive man that I destroyed myself. You see, so that's evil, or the shadow aspect of the warrior within. Whenever you find that there is addiction, there's an over identification with the lover aspect, sensuality. I've struggled here also too, where I'm not wanting to feel my feelings at certain times in my life, and so marijuana, or more readily people are using like prescription drugs and alcohol, and these are things that a unresourceful relationship to our lover brings about, and it's all about our wounded hearts. And just to complete the circle, as it relates to the magician, an unresourceful relationship to the magician shows up in a myriad of different ways, one of which is this very cool, secular, analytical, atheist type that doesn't really get its hands dirty with anything that he can't objectify. You see what I'm saying? So like the keyboard warrior is a really good example of the guy who sits back and he's so clever writing all this stuff and he knows so much, but then on the other end of the spectrum, he forgets that there's a human being there and that and a lot of his acting out is really just a manifestation of his own sense of weakness. You see.
Mhm. I've been reading a lot from Brene Brown lately, and she's done a lot of research on basically vulnerability and the importance of it in our society and our culture as a whole, and how men in particular, according to her research, man's greatest fear is basically feeling vulnerable. And so you mentioned it's been tough at times getting in touch with their feelings. That's definitely the same for me. How important how important is it for men to get in touch with their feelings and their vulnerability, even though that's in our society that's marked as like weak?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, again, once again, it's not a judgment of feeling or emotion. It's how we relate to it. And, I've related to my emotions, and I've related to them intellectually in different ways. And my position has been dynamic and has evolved. And the point now where I realize that emotion, when tapped into, is access to our unconscious. We know this. So, whenever a feeling comes up, an emotion comes up, it's never wrong. Really, what it is guidance. It's letting you know something that's beyond the intellect. Emotional guidance system is a term that Abraham Hicks likes to use. So there's value in there. There's tremendous value. There's where we get our intuition from. Without feeling, there is no intuition. Without sensation, there's no intuition. But what makes a man and a woman very different is that, generally speaking, men work from the head. That's why, in the Bible it says that the man is the head of the family, the man is the head of the wife, the woman is the heart. And their general propensity towards relating to life in a either mental or emotional way is very subject to the sexes. Men and women are different. That's one stance I guess I need to make today, because we're in such a confused state. Men and women are different, and the way women relate to their outer world is through their emotions, through feelings. And that's why you've got characters like Kali in Indian mythology. She's a wild woman. Women are always associated with nature and the ocean. They're just feeling, and even based on their cycles, you never know what you're going to get with a woman. So they're guided more by their emotion and their feeling. But for a man to really be a man, we get to be more objective about our feelings, and rather than allowing our feelings to dictate our actions or be spontaneous based on what we feel in the instant, we have the capacity to objectify, to rationalize, to step back for a moment and think, okay, what is this emotion telling me? Right? I'm angry here. Do I see if this is going to sound very strange, but if I feel an anger come up and I go and I lash out like a big tough guy, I'm strong. I am a big tough guy. And I feel some anger and I don't like the guy that I'm angry, and I go knock him out. That's being very feminine. That's allowing emotions to guide me in my outer life, rather than stopping for a moment, which is very masculine, to be still. That's what king is about, the being. Be still enough to sense the emotion, but then have the analytical, logical perspective that men are intended to have about what their life is going to become. That's what a king is. A king builds his life. He creates a kingdom. Now, if I'm trying to create a kingdom and I'm out there punching people left and right, it's going to be a fucked up kingdom, because the king is out of control. He's allowing his emotions to guide him, and he's behaving more like a queen or a woman than a man.
Hmm. Now, do you feel like it's important for men to, I've watched videos from you on this, to get out their warrior and even get out their shadow side, so that they can just get that out of their system, so that they can then be kind of more still after they've released all that crap? Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm a big fan of both Carl Jung and Wilhelm Reich. And Wilhelm Reich was a psychoanalyst. He worked with Sigmund Freud, and he surmised that most of our neuroses, our mental problems, show up physically in the body as a defense mechanism against feeling. And the very first defense mechanism against feeling is stifling the breath. You hold your breath. That's why I talk about breathing into your balls. You hold your breath. And you got to understand that the human being is a breathing mechanism. From the time you come out the womb, the very first thing you're doing is is this wave of breathing, and it's a pulsation, just like the whole universe pulsates. Every cell in your body pulsates. The heart pulsates. Breathing is a pulsation, an inhalation and an exhalation. And when we begin to bite down our lip or suck it up and hold it in, when emotion rises, the body doesn't forget. The body then begins to hold you in that pattern, in that defense mechanism, that defense pattern. If we don't recognize our emotions and our holding back of those emotions, they will rule us from the underworld. That's why one of the things Carl Jung speaks about is shedding light upon the shadows, working with our shadow selves, not to run away from it, because when we run away from our shadows, we end up projecting it outwards and blaming other people, blaming that culture or blaming women or blaming my dad, rather than looking within. And then when you contrast that logical, analytical way of dealing with it, and you not just contrast, but integrate it with the work of Wilhelm Reich, you find that by helping someone restore their capacity to breathe deeply through movement, exercise, body work, things of this nature, bioenergetics, you not only help the person, ultimately the goal would be to help them resolve the inner spiritual battle, but then also release the physical tension that continues to hold us trapped unconsciously.
Yeah. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I recently found that there's a practitioner here that does bioenergetics. So I'm really excited to get a session soon. So I saw your recent video about MGTOW, men going their own way, and I really liked what you had to say in that. You talked about how there's part of it they're doing right, where they're sounds like I don't know a lot about it, but it sounds like they're almost rejecting women and rejecting marriage and just going their own way because everything that seems to be against men in this day and age. But I really liked your perspective on it in how by chasing money it is still being lost in matter, basically, or the mother, you said.
Yes.
With a capital M. Could you go into detail on that?
Well, a lot of our issues stem from our experience with parents, right? And so our ancestors knew this. They understood that there is a earthly mother and there's a heavenly mother. And there's an earthly father and there's a heavenly father. In other words, there's a physical and there's a metaphysical. And this has been cross-cultural. This has always been, this is what the mythologies and the religions continue to show us and tell us. And we're reintegrating that. We're learning these things again, which is great. But there are principles associated with dealing with those aspects of ourselves interiorly. And so in traditional cultures, the parents, they knew much more and they were practicing much more powerful nurturing techniques for their young people than we are here today. What they would recognize is that a young man would get to a point in his life where he's beginning to feel his aggression, starting to feel his oats. He's that part of himself that wants to reach out as a man, right? That's what the penis does, reach out, is needing some context. And the first place to start to bring that maturity into, that mature context into the newfound libido, the newfound energy, is to strip him away from the world of the mother, the world of the civilization, the world of matter, sensation, women, food, water even. And oftentimes they would take the men, the older men, the elders, the ritual elders, and the women conspired to have the young man removed from the society. This was called initiation. Removed from the society and put through challenge. Things have been easy up until now. You're sucking on mom's tit. You got water flowing at the spigot. You got all the food you want. You might even be fucking by now. So you're a cozy little dude, but now you're starting to feel yourself. You ought to earn some perspective about how you're going to use this energy moving into the next part of your life. Today, we because we don't have that, we end up with young men who either spill their energy out all over the place, wasting it, or are confused about it and shut it down. And then you get the two polar opposites of, like I spoke about before, like that warrior that's just out there and he's killing and he's crushing it till he kills himself. That was me. Till he just starts destroying his body, destroying his relationships, destroying things in his life. Or you end up with the polar opposite, which is the coward, which is the guy who can't relate to his sexual energy, who is soft or shut down in a way. And so in order to avoid these types of imbalances that lead to dysfunctional men in society, the fathers introduced the boy to the world of the father. And if you look at the etiologies of these words, mother and father, mother comes from the word matter, maternal, if you take it back there, maternity, material. If you look at the word father, coming from pater, which is pattern, which is where we get archetypes. Archetypes are patterns of ways of being. So really, as a human being, we are the father's pattern in the mother's matter. We're pattern in matter. And so when we're relating to the world of the father, we're relating to the world of the pattern, we're relating to, and this is super, super important, we're relating to how men have taught one another to be in society for the purpose of survival. What is right and what is wrong? We don't have this any longer. We live in a world where we live in a gray soup which I totally understand, walls and boundaries and divisions and separations are being dissolved. You got to break eggs to make an omelet, but at the same time, what that does is it leaves young men with no purpose, no guiding principles, nothing to believe in, nothing to strive for, no path. And because we're living in a world now that women have received so much upraisement, where now they think they're equal in par to men, they're out there struggling and striving and being CEOs just like men. Now everybody suffers because men lose their capacity to provide and to protect and to serve and to do the things that we've traditionally done since the dawn of age. And women suffer too, because women are now forced into this masculinized role where they're being trained to be like men out there in the marketplace. And then the children suffer because then there's no one home for the children. So you got men who are basically removed from the family. There's of no value to them in many regards. And then women who then either are acting as the men in the relationship, and even in married relationships or pair bonded relationships, a lot of times we get baited down as men, and the women step up in the masculine role. They're the leader in the family, or the man completely is kicked out of the family. He ends up in prison, like so many do, for bullshit charges, or divorce, and then the woman becomes dependent on the state, where the state comes in now and is either providing for you through welfare programs, where if you do have two people in the home, you don't qualify for it, or if it is depending on the state that you live in, the courts weigh heavily in favor of the woman. So you got like Hitler's prophecy when he said the greatest way to control the people is to take the fathers out of the home and make the women dependent on the state. And that's what we're seeing here in America. Right.
So yeah, I'm recently got married actually, and I'm married to a very empowered woman, and she, I'm helping her grow her YouTube channel, and she's building a lot of momentum, being a leader of women basically. And so, at times I'm experiencing that, like what's my purpose in all this? Because growing up, my dad was the head of the household and a high performing lawyer, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so that's kind of how I got trained. And now there's this role reversal where I find myself like cleaning the house and things that I don't like doing, like kind of, things that in the past generation women would do. Mm-hmm. So how can men deal with this kind of confusing time, and how can they find purpose?
Well, I got to just throw it out there. I've been with my wife since we were 14 years old. We've been dating since we were kids. Our 16-year wedding anniversary just passed. We've been together for about 25 years. We have 4 children. We love each other more now than ever before, and our relationship is super strong and healthy. A part of the reason why that is because we know our roles and we play our part. We decided very early on was going to be a stay-at-home mom, even though she has a higher degree than me. And I was going to do what it takes in order to go out there and protect and provide for my family. She fulfills and loves her role as a mom and a caretaker and a homemaker as much as I love and fulfill my role as a leader and as a businessman and as a provider for my family. These are the natural roles. These are the roles that we've played forever. And science has shown us that if given their own way to just naturally select, men will go out and do the outward extroverted work, and women will congregate and work inside in the kitchen, if you will. These are instincts. These are innate. And if we're hoping to have really good relationships, it is critical that we begin to reconstruct the family in the way it's meant to be. And the gender roles are biological. They're not made up. So we got a lot of confusion. We got a lot of beta feminized men with no purpose, and a lot of over masculinized aggressive women, and topsy-turvy. Here we go.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, with women becoming more active and putting themselves out there in their careers and things like that, I think that's really confusing for men.
Yeah, well, then it's confusing for everyone too, because like I said, the family suffers because now who's taking care of the children? Who's caring for the children? I think it's such a sad fact that we've lost the value of both sexes, but I'm going to speak on women's behalf for this moment. Women have the most powerful capacity to create that men only wish we could have, and that's why we're out there building empires, and that is to create another human life. There is no greater gift than the ability to have two loving people come together and bring forth another life. There's nothing more miraculous, there's nothing more amazing, but yet we live in a world where now that happens and there's no one caring for the kids. The kids end up in daycare or with babysitters, and once they get of age, well, what did I say before about the state? The state takes over and starts training them in school.
Okay, so it's an interesting time, and I do think I see what you're saying with the gender roles and how we're designed. I do think that's not always the case. I do think there are cases where maybe the woman is more masculine and the guy is more feminine. That happens sometimes, and
that has to be agreed upon. And I see that the case, and I have many friends that are like that. I just spoke to a woman who's a great friend of mine. She was a shot putter and a discus thrower in college. I mean, she's a beast. She was jacked. Her husband is a bit more effeminate, much more effeminate. And they play their roles so beautifully. They have an amazing family. They have a business together. And they just know. He knows that I play second fiddle. My wife is the aggressor. She's the alpha in the relationship. And when that's established, remember the very first thing I said is know your roles and play your part. Once that's established and we recognize the value of each role and each of us take on our role, then it's all right. Then we can go beyond penis and vagina. We're really dealing with the spirituality of it, which is male and female, or yin and yang, energy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's mainly on making the agreements that feels right, and if you can't come to agreement, then it might not be a good fit.
Right.
Okay. And then I recently saw a video that you made about kind of a triggering topic for men, which is circumcision. And this is a topic that I've been getting into the last 2 years or so. I made a video about my personal reactions to really just becoming aware of what was done to me, and fully putting my attention on that, and just feeling a lot of emotions come up around that. And it was definitely one of my most popular videos that I put out. So I think there's definitely an awakening happening right now where we're becoming aware of what's been done to us. And I think it's tragic and horrible.
In any other enlightened society would be considered what it actually is, which is male genital mutilation. We don't do it to girls because it's barbaric. But why is it this is so overlooked and so swept under the carpet? There is an agenda at hand, and it's against men. You can't work towards empowering men. And that's what we do. Guys like you who've got this podcast and the work that I do, we're empowering men. We can't work towards empowering men if we don't look at the core trauma, the core physical issue that emasculates us at our root, our literal physical root, which is you've been mutilated, you've been tortured, you've been destroyed as a male sexual creature.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I've done more and more research on it, and it sounds like you have too. And basically, from what I've learned, it was basically a procedure done. It sounds like it started with the Jewish communities, thousands of years ago, and it was basically done to prevent a man from being in his full sexual power, and so that he's basically more controllable. Is that?
Yes, that's 100% true. I would invite you to watch a YouTube video by Eric Klopper where he gave
Yes.
Did you watch that?
I did.
The references he made to the reason why the Jewish leaders were doing that, as you discovered, were specifically to check a man's pride and to lower his libido. It was designed to emasculate.
Wow. And just the fact that it's happening, especially in America, where it's the only country where it's a standard procedure,
right?
That you also have to pay for, by the way, so they're profiting off of it as well. Is happening still at such a large scale.
Yep.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah, and of course you watch it. Did you see American Circumcision also too?
Oh, I haven't watched that yet. I definitely got to watch that.
It'll be released on YouTube. It's been a documentary. I think it's been out about a year or so, but he's releasing it on YouTube and giving it a big social media push on the 30th of this month. So definitely go see it. It's a shame. It's a shame what our government and the American Health Association is doing with their lies and their twisted twisted science to convince us that it's somehow healthier or that it's somehow more hygienic. And all I would say, it doesn't take much for someone to just think with your heart for a moment, as a feeling human being. This is where that part of our lover consciousness comes in. You're cutting off the piece of a baby's penis. I don't need too much statistic or convincing to see that that's wrong. But then when they go and make these claims about the science behind it, once again, I don't need to be a scientist or a statistician to consider that if a woman has a stinky vagina with pussy cheese and she's getting infections and shit of that nature, it's because she's not taking good care of her vagina. You don't cut off her vagina or get rid of her vagina because it gets dirty. And it's the same thing with a man. If a man's not taking care of his penis, not cleaning it well, it's not being cared for in the right way, you don't cut it off, right? So it's just, sometimes I think we just lose our common sense in all of the objectivity. We become way too objective with regard to science and materialistic reductionism that we forget to think.
Right. And it seems like America kind of worships science, and just like anything that's proven by science is like God's will or whatever.
Yeah, it's the new religion. You're right. And people take it on blind faith. They don't look too much further than whatever white paper they produce and whatever sound bites they throw out. Mm-hmm. It's worse than religion. Right.
So in my opinion, we need to get in touch with our intuition and our hearts. And sounds like you said that on
a big part of it. And that's where I kind of contradict myself, but that's life is a contradiction, where men, we are becoming over feminized and way too emotional. And it leads to violence. It leads to depression. It leads to confusion. But at the same time, we're also needing to come back to the language of our heart, which is where, the opposite of this over rational way of being shows up. We've got the evil is in the deep polarity, in the black and white of things, where I'm talking about integration, where we relate to our hearts so that we can tap into our intuition and have a feeling mind, rather than just the straight, cold, analytical mind. But at the same time, we can't let ourselves become overwhelmed by feelings such that it leads us to, more so than anything, violence.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's a double-edged sword, so to speak. It's not just a simple answer. It's cultivating the fully integrated, your fully integrated heart and intuition.
Yes.
Right. Because we can
relationship. It's a relationship between the head and the heart, right? Because we can live in the world of the woman, and like we spoke about before in initiation, and we'll get swept away and become mama's boys. That's why, we have so many young men, like, especially in the African-American community, that are so protective of their mommies because they had no daddies. And you say anything about my mama and I'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
That's the over-feminized mama's boy. That's a very beta way of being. And it doesn't serve us. So that's the other ill of it. It can go so far as to cause us to be violent and angry.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know a lot about the body, obviously, and you've studied a lot of bioenergetics. What is your opinion on how this horrific procedure, circumcision, affects the male body as well as the male emotional and psychological system?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to approach this because we're multidimensional beings, and we could look at ourselves from multiple different angles, not with one being right or wrong or any of them being separate from the others, but taking a very mechanical approach to breathing, where Wilhelm Reich spoke about. I was doing it before, but when we breathe, it's not just sucking in air and exchanging oxygen. That we are a breathing mechanism. And he called our breathing mechanism, which is a very slight wave, an extension and inflection, the orgastic wave or the breathing wave. And so what we're wanting is to have a free-flowing orgastic wave. We want to be able to breathe softly. And when we breathe softly, that means there's no tension in the muscle. And if there's no tension in the muscle, the mind is not disturbed. The mind is the body. If there's tension in the mind, the body will be disturbed. That's why the breathing becomes stifled. But if there's tension in the body, it destroys the mind. That's why there's anxiety. Most of the time, people with anxiety, if they just go exercise, they go walk around the block or do some breathing, the anxiety miraculously disappears. So when we talk about the trauma, which there's so much research today on trauma and the body that it's ridiculous. I refer you to Peter Levine and Robert Scayer. There's so much out there that if you just consider that the very first wound, the very first experience that a young boy has physically, psychologically, sexually, socially in the human world is a strike to his genitalia, you can only imagine how that distorts that beautiful rhythmic vibrational hum that is meant to happen. If you watch the documentary American Circumcision, I cried when I watched. They showed a circumcision happening, and the baby is screaming. His face is red. Just imagine your first experience here. Violence. Ah! Ah! They don't use any anesthesia or anything like that for the most part. Once the baby, and if you study trauma, we can go into the dynamics of this, but what I saw in that documentary that hurt my heart more than anything was not the screaming baby. That was still a healthy baby, full of energy. When the procedure was done, the baby laid shocked. Face was just... And where at first there was life in the baby's face because it was screaming, it was very red, the baby's face turned gray.
Oh my God.
Again, thinking heart. I can go into what I know about trauma in the body, but think with the heart for a moment. How could that not be damaging to the organism? Deeply, deeply damaging to the organism.
Wow. Yeah, so I think one of the normal reactions for men is probably rage. It might be denial at first, but then probably rage.
Yeah.
So how can guys like deal with this? Because I think it's really hard for guys to even realize what was done.
Well, the very first thing that's required is forgiveness, because if we don't forgive our parents, we don't forgive the world that we live in, we're going to be trapped in the rage that you just described. We're going to be trapped in anger. And again, like I said before, then that becomes a demon that rules our lives.
Yeah.
I've known anger a lot of my life. I still carry quite a bit of it. And it doesn't serve. It's energizing for sure. But whatever fruits it produces, and I know it in my own experience, whatever fruits it produces comes with a price tag to pay, because it came out of anger or it came out of fear. So our very first place to begin is with unconditional self-love, forgiveness, and forgiveness, inner and outer forgiveness.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know of a guy who just is really enraged and just kind of attached to that anger, and I see it like ruining his life. So it's really hard to see.
Yeah, and that's one of those examples where a real man will detach from the emotion, look at it objectively, and with maturity come to a place where forgiveness is possible. Because when forgiveness is there, then we can drop it. I forgive. Man, it's been an amazing journey these past, I'm turning 40 next year in April, and probably the past 5 years or so, the amount of healing that I've had, particularly as it relates to my relationship to my father, has been tremendous. I was very angry at my father. I grew up very angry for reasons that were very unconscious that I've come to realize. And because I've forgiven my father on the inside, and I love him so much more, the blessings that pour out from him energetically, but also my dad likes to talk. He's like me. But I couldn't receive it before. Now I can take it in and I can mature. And unlike my experience as a boy and as a young man that never was initiated, as a 40-year-old man, now finally that separation from the world of the matter, the world of the mother that typically takes place at 14. Now that I'm 40, I can approach my father. I can approach the world of the father. And when you can approach the world of the father, you're approaching the archetypal realm. Remember, I said that word father comes from pattern. And when we're talking about the eternal father, when we're talking about God the Father, we're talking about our expanded nature.
Yeah. I imagine you're talking about just like pure consciousness, like pure awareness.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard to explain the father energy because it's not, you can't like touch it and feel it.
Right.
Do you have any practices where how guys can get more in touch with the father energy?
Well, I've gone about it in a myriad of different ways, and most recently, based on my experience and some of what I'm learning, what is really required, and I don't know where you are in your life with this, but is a relationship with your father. You have a father. How's your relationship with your father?
It's good. It's definitely gotten better over the years. We had a dramatic situation. We had a dramatic encounter with each other right before the wedding, actually, with a huge emotional release from my dad, which I think was good for us both.
Yeah. He carries a lot of pain too. All our fathers carry a lot of pain, specifically in this American culture or society.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're definitely, we've always been pretty close, but we're definitely getting even closer, emotionally and in the heart, which felt kind of taboo growing up, just I guess of our culture.
Right. Yeah.
And
the culture is against the father.
What was that?
The culture is against the father, and you don't have to look very far. You don't have to look any further than pop culture imagery of the father. Just think of Homer Simpson or Al Bundy. I even watched a commercial, a cartoon from the 1920s recently. I got them on YouTube, and sometimes they show like clips from things 100 years ago. So the 1920s, they had cartoons And the cartoon showed different people in the family. You know, it was going through the roster of people in the family so that they can go into a dialogue of what's going to happen in the cartoon. And of course, the children were playing. The mom was doing something resourceful. The father was a complete fool out there trying to get the lawnmower going or something. And he slips and falls and hits him in the head. It's like, well, look, here's the idiot dad. So this started a long time ago. We are led to be ashamed as men of our power. We're led to be afraid of our power and to mistrust our power, all because we mistrust our fathers and we mistrust men. This is a deep emotional and psychological wound.
Yeah, this is mostly like unconscious, right?
Yeah, well, the unconscious is fed by what the conscious mind takes in. And when we take in popular culture and media and, the agendas that the universities shove down our throats and the mainstream media, we can't help but be swayed and led astray.
Yeah. So now that you're a father, going through your own healing with your father and leading these men's rites of passage, it sounds like you're doing now. How is this impacting you as a father and how you treat your children?
Well, the very first thing you ought to know is that I've got 3 daughters.
Okay.
And then I have a son, and my son's the youngest. It's interesting because I was the oldest of all boys, my sister being the youngest. So I was 3 boys and a sister growing up. I was the first, the alpha, the Aries. Yeah. And my son being the youngest of 3 girls. So I'm getting to learn a lot about him, and he's still very young. He just turned 8, and we're very, very, very different. The very first thing I acknowledge is loving him just the way he is, loving him the way he is. One of the things that, we hope to avert is this needing to make our children something in our own image, and I'm not talking about defying principles and defying realities and making or giving people lenience to be something evil or something less than themselves, but respecting and honoring, even though, we're very different. That's what unity and diversity means. So I knew nothing about girls. To be completely honest, I dated my high school girlfriend and I married her. I didn't date very much, and then here I am. I was captain of the football team, professional strongman. My gym was all men. I'm a man's man, just manly man all around. And part of the reason why I've had a chance to look at my soul these past few years is because I have been swimming in a sea of femininity. My oldest daughter is 14 years old. She's the age I was when I met my wife. And I got 2 younger daughters being close to being teenagers. And even my 2 cats, felines are feminine, and they're both feminine felines. There's just women energy all around me. And so it's that much more important for me to be able to understand and relate to the feminine, but not be overtaken by it. And it's a tightrope.
Totally, I can totally relate to that. Being with a very feminine woman, this is the woman I chose, and I definitely relate to the tightrope feeling.
Yeah, they can sweep you away just like the ocean.
Yeah. Okay. So your relationship with your son, what is that teaching you? It sounds like you mentioned he's different than you in a lot of ways. Or?
Well, I just look at the birth order and the experience with.
Yeah.
So that alone, barring absolutely anything else, we just came here with a different context, and more than anything, it is. My son is so good. He's very different than I was. I was very extroverted and when I say good, I mean like he's easy to be around. I don't think I was that easy to be around. I was hyperactive and I was out there and stuff. And so he's easy to love. And so one of these things where I have to allow it to unfold in order to see where it goes. But I just remain a appreciator of him and of all of my children, appreciating them for who they are, and being there as an example for what a man is to both my daughters and my son, and be there to protect and provide and to teach and to be a great leader in my home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now lastly, I want to go into men's rites of passage and the, I think, growing importance of that in our current society. Mm-hmm. How are you helping men through initiations, and how is that impacting them?
Well, I felt the call to do this work from the time I taught my first high school friend how to lift a barbell. And anybody who's a fitness coach or a strength coach, I like to say coaches are kings. They totally get it, because when you mentor somebody in that way, particularly a young man in that way, in order to build his body up, you're challenging him with resistance, and he's forced to confront his own weakness. There is a metamorphosis, not just of body, but of soul and of mind. So, a large part of my initiation came through my uncle teaching me how to lift when I was 14 years old. All right. So this has just been something that I've been called to in its various different aspects. In order to hold that space for men, I've been put through many trials and have been forced to look at my own woundedness. Because if I'm unaware of my own darkness, unaware of my own woundedness, then I'm only operating out of the fear or the anger that we spoke about before as it relates to young men. So more so than anything, I think where this is going is that the initiation process begins with the maturity of elders, or the development of men that can hold space and love young men, because we've explored that space and we love ourselves. You see, so for example, you could look at the military as an initiation, and I haven't been in the military, but I'm just using this example, where if there's abuse from above, you've got these young men who subject themselves. They give yourself over to the military or to the, to the communitas that you're going through this with. And although there must be boundaries and there must be challenge from above, like a drill sergeant, if it's not tempered with, or if it's not integrated with true love in the part of that leader, then it's just sadism. It's just punishment.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, both of my grandfathers were in the military at some point of their life, and I think that molded them.
Yeah.
I don't, me personally, maybe I could do some work around this, but I haven't received much wisdom from my grandfathers, and maybe I don't know. I think it has to do with culture and how culture molded them. And the conversations I've had with my grandfathers is more just about how can I fit in, and how can I get a good job and work my ass off. And that in itself isn't bad, but just how can I fit into society? And I'm not into that. I'm very much in resistance to just fitting in, unless that's my calling, but it's not right now. So
I can totally understand.
How can we get that wisdom if our grandfathers didn't receive that?
Well, our grandfathers did receive a tremendous amount of wisdom, except for the most part, that wisdom and what they knew was out there. So this is how you get a job. This is how you are with a woman. This is how you go to church. This is how you follow in line. This is what the country needs to do. Go to war, you do it. So all of the allegiance was out there. I think we're living in an age of, are definitely living in an age of deconstructionism. We're deconstructing everything in a secular way. Science is just constantly breaking things down. Even I don't get too much into the politics of things, but I have more lately than ever. And this agenda by the progressives to even break up the sexes. Like, there are two sexes. And when homosexuality became a thing, it made sense. I was like, okay, cool, because my brother's gay. But he's a gay man. And you could even look at where where he was emasculated. And, you know, I don't want to speak too much about it, but he drank soy formula as a kid because my mom didn't breastfeed. You know, so, and it's known to feminize. But we're at this point now where gay rights isn't enough, which that's a challenge in and of itself, because now you split yourself off from the society. But now they say there's like 120 different genders. We're splintering ourselves up such that there's nothing but division amongst us. So we're left in a confused soup mess with no identity. We're living through an identity crisis. So where your grandfather had an identity, there's some value to having that. I know what a man is. I know where I go. I know what a woman is. I know what to do. I know how to live my life. And I'm going to thank God, thank America, and I pay my taxes. Very clear. And I can only imagine how much easier it was for them in one way. Now we live in a different age where some things are easier, but some things are harder. A man doesn't know what to do. A man doesn't even know what a man is anymore, because things have been broken down and dissolved to such a degree that there's pure chaos. You see? So what we get to do as a new generation of men is to redefine the boundaries. And there shall be boundaries. There must be boundaries. If there's no boundaries, they're chaos, and men are the boundary holders. That's why we're warriors. That's why we're kings. So what we get to do is to consult our hearts, discover what is true, what is right, and erect boundaries for our own life and raise our families with these right boundaries. And I'm not saying what is and what isn't right, but it's important that you are firm in your convictions.
Yeah. Okay, and now at Grounding Man, I imagine you do a lot of, obviously, grounding and bioenergetics work and probably emotional release. And you also talked about the father energy is more of like kind of up cosmos. So how do those work together?
So once again, referring to the work of Carl Jung and the work of Wilhelm Reich. So where you mentioned grounding, yes, we must learn how to breathe into our balls. We're not breathing, we're not accessing our body, we're not accessing our full capacity. We're shut down, we're in self-made prisons. But at the same time, context must be made of what's discovered. Context for the emotion that you've been, if you come to a place where emotion is, say anger, you confront your anger for the first time, you've been angry on the inside, but you've never expressed it, and you come to confront your anger, context must be made of it. And when we're talking about the world of the father, we're talking about the archetypal world, we're talking about the work of Carl Jung, and that goes back to your very first question. How do you relate to this new energy, this new awakened warrior within you? That awakened warrior, if not integrated properly, can turn to rage. And then all of a sudden, it's a jihad out there, and everybody's an enemy, a crusade out there, and everybody's the enemy, rather than allowing that life force to be generative.
So once at least in my experience, once I've done a lot of kind of work around anger as well. Once I learned to release my energy and my anger in healthy ways, then I can be more, more of a conscious man, more still and present with people.
Yeah. Number one, when you release that, when you have that emotional catharsis, it's like an orgasm. When you're horny and you've been walking around, you haven't had sex in a couple days or weeks, depending on who you are. And it's just like this itch I got to scratch. And it's like, it starts to kind of take over if you're not conscious. Well, it's the same thing with any emotion like anger. And so when you give yourself space to have that release, orgasm, that's even the way Reich referred to it. It was like orgastic release. Number one, you're more relaxed. You can come down for a moment. But then you can put that experience into context. Wow, I didn't know I had that in me. I've never been that angry. I've never shouted like that before. I've been afraid to, and you'll never reach that unless you become, unless you have really the support of someone who can guide you that way, to give you the confidence that it's okay, keep going, keep breathing, keep shouting, and then all of a sudden it erupts, and you've been hiding from it all this time. And then rather than, and this is where it becomes very important for men to begin to learn to relate to their emotions in a resourceful way, then you can look at that and say, boy, where was that when my girlfriend cheated on me and I needed to speak up? Where was that when the guy at work stole my computer and wouldn't fess up and I bit my lip? You see, where was that warrior energy when it was appropriate for me to be angry, but then to use it resourcefully, speak up, rather than being passive aggressive or shutting it down? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So by getting in touch with that energy, we become familiar with this energy that we've kept suppressed for so long. Then we can learn how to use it resourcefully and in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, it's ruling you from the unconscious. It doesn't disappear. You can't push the emotion down and it not erupt in perverted ways. It will come back and haunt you.
Right.
We have to confront it. This is facing the dragon.
Okay, great. So what is Grounding Man, and where can guys learn about it?
Grounding Man is where men get together in a program that I put together, where we work on ourselves. We work through the very things we're talking about right now. The archetype of initiation, relating to our four archetypes, our four quarters, the full male psyche, king, warrior, magician, lover, but not in just a merely talkative way. You know, a part of the feminization of the Western male has been putting him in classrooms, sitting him down and feeding him information, where it's known that the male has an aggressive body. He needs to use his body. He needs to get out and do things. So rather than just bringing context and awareness through speech and conversation, which is a part of it, but maybe about a third of it, what we're really doing also too is moving the energy. Do you see what I'm saying? Through exercise and breathing and catharsis. So rather than speaking about confronting your anger, we'll do an exercise where we get an opportunity to confront our anger physically, you see?
Yeah. And what are the results that guys get from that?
Well, like I just said, when that catharsis is released, when that energy is released, you're no longer possessed by the demon of your emotion. You're no longer possessed by the sadness or the anger or the fear. So you're in many ways, it's an exorcism. It's getting rid of baggage. Let's get this shit out of us so it no longer rules us. And then with that, you now are available to approach life from a more balanced way. You know, a lot of times we're wondering where our king energy is. Well, it's been trapped under all this passive aggressiveness because you haven't spoken up about the wrongs that have been done to you, or you never set up any boundaries and you let people walk all over you, or you're still suffering from a heartbreak that you had 10 years ago. You see? Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much, Elliott, for talking with me today. I fully support this mission of awakening men to who we are and empowering each other in a healthy way. So really appreciate the work you're doing.
And I'll be in Austin, Texas in January doing another Grounding Man. So maybe
I was going to ask you. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I haven't released details yet, but I really liked Austin a lot. We found a great location there to do it outside of Austin. But yeah, we'll be back doing Grounding Man.